We're going to start learning about quadrilaterals. And the first type of quadrilateral we're going to study is the parallelogram. So this worksheet has the whole parallelogram family: parallelogram, rhombus, rectangle, and square. Today's focus is just on the parallelogram. There are 5 characteristics I want to give you about every parallelogram. So as soon as you're told that something is a parallelogram, these are 5 things you know. The first one is the definition of a parallelogram that says both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. So in other words, these sides are parallel. Remember, those arrows mean parallel and not congruent. The little arrows, I'll make them into little triangles, mean parallel. Both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. The next characteristic of parallelograms also has to do with the sides. It's the fact that both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. So now I'm going to put hash marks on these to let you know that the opposite sides are congruent. The next one has to do with the angles. We're going to tell you that both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. So this angle is congruent to this one, and this angle is congruent to this one. Number 4 also has to do with the angles, but it has to do with the consecutive angles. Consecutive angles are supplementary. Remember, that means they add up to 180. So this angle and the one next to it add up to 180. These two add up to 180. And that has to do with the parallel lines. Remember, if the lines were parallel, the same side interior angles were supplementary, and that's what these angles are. They're the same side interior angles. Number 5 is that the diagonals bisect each other. Diagonals bisect each other. So it's important to notice that that does not mean that the diagonals bisect the angles. It just means that the diagonals, let's see if I can draw a little bit in here, these diagonals bisect each other. So this piece and this piece are congruent, and this piece and this piece are congruent. So the diagonals bisect each other. 5 things we know about every parallelogram. So we're going to put those into practice now. I have some practice problems on another page. Here we go. So the first one, notice it's a parallelogram. It has the little arrows. They're hard to see, but they're there. We know that the opposite sides are congruent. So I'm going to say that 8x minus 3 equals 37. And then I solve and get x equals 5. Opposite sides are congruent. So I know that 7y plus 2 equals 26. I don't think this is a nice number, but we can still solve it. So 7y equals 24. So I'm going to say y is 24 over 7. If you want to change it into, 3 3/7, you could. But you don't have to. You could stop right there. Opposite sides are congruent. The next one, notice it's asking me about the angles. So we can use both of those angle rules. We know that the opposite angles are congruent. So A must be 53 degrees. And then we know that the consecutive angles are supplementary. So 180 minus 53 would give us 127. So angle C is 127, and since opposite angles are congruent again, B is 127. Opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles are supplementary. All right, number 3. This one looks like it has to do with the diagonals. Remember we said the diagonals bisect each other. So this segment is congruent to this one, and this segment is congruent to this one. So we solve. First off, 3x equals 12. So x is 4. And this one, 5y plus 4 equals 4y plus 4. Well, this one's going to be strange. Y equals 0. We don't usually get a 0 for our variable, but this one works. So each of these segments is equal to 4. So that's what we mean by the diagonals bisect each other. Number 4. Wow, they're asking us to find a lot of different things here. So we can pick, I'm going to start in the middle because I know this is 60. Remember, vertical angles are congruent, so B must be 60. And if I look at this set of angles, notice that that is a linear pair. So 60 and H would have to add up to 180. So H is 120, and C, since vertical angles are congruent, is also 120. Now I'm going to use my triangle knowledge, because if I look down here, I have 120 and 45, so that's 165. Oop. And I know that this entire triangle has to be 180. So 180 minus 165, I must be 15 degrees. And then I come up here to this triangle, and 85 plus 60 is 145, and I subtract that from 180, and I get 35 for A. Now, think for just a second about our parallel lines. Remember, if these are parallel, and this is my transversal, do you see the Z for my alternate interior angles? So if this angle is 45, angle D must be 45 also. And the triangle above looks like it's going to be the same as the triangle below. So E would have to be 15. And we can do the same thing with parallel lines for this side. If we look at our Z going this way, A and F must be the same thing. So F is also 35 degrees, which leaves us with G as 85 degrees. So you just have to work carefully through those angles. We used a lot of linear pairs. We used alternate interior angles because we had our parallel lines, and we worked with our triangles from there. So that's what you need to know about parallelograms. The 5 characteristics of a parallelogram right here. And hang on to this sheet of paper because we're going to, next class, we're going to build on this.